You are listening to PR Radio Station of America.
The story begins with Genevieve Smith, a 19-year-old living in California. She is the kind of student every parent dreams of raising: disciplined, thoughtful, and cautious with money. After finishing high school, she made the practical choice to study at Santa Rosa Junior College while living at home. She worked part-time jobs, saved every dollar she could, and kept asking herself one question: was finishing her degree at a California university worth the crushing debt it would create? At first, Genevieve considered UC Santa Cruz, a school that had long been her dream. But when she added up the costs of tuition, housing, and fees, the numbers were staggering. Even a public four-year university would mean tens of thousands of dollars in loans, and she did not want to take on a burden that could define the next decade of her life. She saw friends applying for loans without hesitation, some signing papers without fully understanding the interest rates. She worried that she might end up trapped in the same cycle. Then the political landscape added a new layer of fear. The aftermath of the 2024 election brought protests to campuses across the country. Genevieve and her friends whispered about whether their safety would be at risk if they went away to study. She admitted she began to feel that staying in America meant not only paying higher costs, but also dealing with a climate of uncertainty. She wanted her college years to be about learning and exploring, not about worrying whether her school would become a political battlefield. One night, she sat with her laptop and started searching for alternatives. That was when she found universities in the Netherlands. Leiden University at The Hague, Utrecht University in Utrecht. Programs in international law with tuition fees far lower than anything she had seen at home. She imagined herself walking along canals, meeting students from around the world, and gaining an international perspective that could make her a stronger lawyer. Suddenly, the vague idea of leaving home turned into a concrete plan. For Genevieve, the decision was no longer just about saving money. It became about identity, opportunity, and the kind of difference she wanted to make in the world. She told her parents, "I feel as though going overseas I can make a bigger difference." They looked at her with surprise, but also pride. Her story reflected a bigger movement quietly unfolding across America. Students were no longer just dreaming of Ivy League campuses. They were dreaming of Amsterdam, Prague, and Tokyo. The decision to leave had become the first step in rewriting the meaning of higher education for an entire generation. Genevieve's story was personal, but she was not alone. Across America, kitchen table conversations echoed the same themes. Tuition was too high, safety felt uncertain, and opportunities abroad looked brighter. Families who once argued about whether their children should go to Berkeley or Boston were now asking which European country offered the best mix of affordability and prestige. What began as a handful of students quietly applying to foreign universities was quickly becoming a movement. The International Institute of Education tracked a striking rise. 50,000 American students abroad in 2019 had become more than 90,000 by 2024. That was nearly double in just 5 years. In the United Kingdom, UCAS reported a 14% increase in applications from Americans in a single year, the largest jump since the agency started keeping records in 2006. Europe was no longer just a destination for a semester abroad. It was now seen as the place to build an entire degree and future. James Edge, owner of Beyond the States, a consultancy that helps students study overseas, described the shift as overwhelming. Website traffic jumped from just over 600,000 visits to more than 1.5 million in under a year. Strategy calls went from 2,000 to nearly 30,000. Parents from middle-class families, who once thought overseas education was only for the wealthy, were now calling daily. They asked about Prague, Amsterdam, Tokyo, and Seoul. They wanted numbers, costs, and guarantees that their children would be safe. The financial motivation was clear, but the political backdrop amplified the urgency. Students had watched as protests swept across campuses. They had read about international student visas being canceled. They saw universities tied up in litigation with the Trump administration. For many, the message was unavoidable. Higher education at home was becoming unstable, unpredictable, and unsafe. Leaving the country no longer felt like a radical option. It felt like the logical path. Consultants and educators agreed that what was once a trickle was now a river. Social media amplified it. with TikTok videos and Instagram reels showing American students living in Prague apartments, cycling in Amsterdam, or eating ramen in Tokyo. Younger students, still in high school, began saving these clips as if they were college brochures. The dream of studying abroad was no longer a niche fantasy. It was a generational shift, driven by cost, politics, and the desire to see the world. The movement was not just happening, it was accelerating. Among the thousands of students chasing education overseas was Gisladette Davis, a 21-year-old who grew up in a military family. Moving often gave her resilience, so when she saw a TikTok video about affordable schools in Europe, the idea did not feel impossible. She researched beyond the States, combed through databases of universities, and set her sights on Anglo-American University in Prague. In August 2023, she boarded a flight with her savings, scholarships, and a grant for military families and began her new chapter in the Czech Republic. The rewards were immediate. Tuition was lower than what she would have paid back home, and the cost of living in Prague was manageable. But the biggest reward was cultural. Gisladette's best friends came from Brazil, Japan, and Spain. She ate food she had never heard of, learned to navigate public transport in a foreign language, and traveled to 21 countries in just a few years. She admitted that her semester at Sophia University in Tokyo changed her perspective entirely, saying, "It ruined Europe for me once I saw what school was like in Japan." Other students echoed similar stories. A young engineer from Texas studying in Berlin described late nights in libraries where half the students spoke 3 languages. A student from Chicago studying art in Florence shared how her professors took the class into museums as part of daily lessons. Life abroad was not just cheaper, it felt richer. For many, it was about the experience of being in a classroom where the world was represented at every desk. But there were also real difficulties. Bureaucracy often became a nightmare. Visa renewals meant hours of paperwork and long waits in government offices. Being far from family meant missing weddings, funerals, and the small comfort of Sunday dinners. Some students struggled with loneliness and culture shock. Gisladette admitted that even with the excitement, she sometimes felt unprepared for the American job market. Without internships or alumni connections in her home country, she worried her business degree might not open the same doors. Still, when asked if she regretted her decision, Gisladette was firm. "No regrets," she said. The travel, friendships, and new perspectives outweighed the challenges. She encouraged others to consider the same path, but with open eyes about the realities of visas, distance, and future career prospects. Her story and those like hers showed that the student experience abroad was not perfect, but for many, it was worth it. The gains in personal growth and affordability often outweighed the struggles of distance and uncertainty. For many families, the biggest cost was not measured in money but in distance. Parents waved goodbye at airports knowing they would see their children only a few times a year. Holiday dinners felt emptier, and birthdays were celebrated over patchy video calls. Genevieve admitted she worried about being far from her support system. She knew that when something went wrong, she would not be able to drive home to her parents' house. The physical separation carried an emotional price that even cheaper tuition could not erase. Another cost lay in professional opportunity. American universities often built career pipelines through internships, alumni networks, and corporate recruiters. Students abroad sometimes found themselves shut out of those systems. Gisladette admitted she worried her business degree in Prague might not carry the same weight when applying for jobs in her home country. She saw friends back home attending job fairs, meeting recruiters, and landing internships that opened doors. Meanwhile, she had to rely on her own international contacts, unsure if they would translate into a stable career. The practical challenges piled up as well. Visa renewals meant hours of paperwork, long lines at embassies, and unexpected delays. Some students described feeling like they were always at the mercy of a bureaucrat's decision. Housing was another hurdle. Renting in a foreign country meant navigating contracts in another language, dealing with landlords who saw international students as easy targets, and managing unexpected costs. The affordability of tuition sometimes clashed with the hidden expenses of living abroad. Students also struggled with the fear that they were missing something back home. Friends in America built tight-knit networks through fraternities, sororities, and student clubs. They connected with professors who could recommend them for graduate schools or jobs. For students overseas, those same connections were harder to build. The fear of returning home without a strong network made some question if the savings were worth the long-term cost. Yet even with these struggles, most students like Genevieve and Gisladette repeated the same phrase: no regrets. They admitted the costs were real: emotional distance, career uncertainty, bureaucratic headaches, but the benefits of broader perspectives, travel, and affordability outweighed them. Still, Stage 4 revealed a truth often hidden behind Instagram posts of smiling students in foreign cities. The decision to leave home brought freedom, but it also brought weight, sacrifice, and questions about what might have been lost along the way. By 2025, what started as scattered individual choices had turned into a wave that could not be ignored. More than 90,000 American students were studying abroad, nearly double the number from just a few years earlier. Guidance counselors in high schools began including international universities in their lists of options, something unheard of a decade ago. Parents who once asked about Harvard or Stanford were now asking about tuition costs in Prague, Paris, or Seoul. The movement was no longer an experiment. It was a new reality. European and Asian countries saw opportunity in the American exodus. Universities in the Netherlands, Germany, and Japan expanded English-language programs specifically to attract foreign students. Governments offered streamlined visa processes to make it easier for Americans to enroll. For them, it was more than just tuition revenue. It was an investment in brainpower and soft power. By welcoming disillusioned American students, these countries built cultural bridges and strengthened their global reputations as education hubs. Meanwhile, back home, analysts sounded alarms. If American students continued to leave in large numbers, what would that mean for the country's universities? The rising cost of tuition had already fueled public debate, but now there was proof of a breaking point. Students were voting with their feet. Critics warned that if reforms were not made to reduce costs and restore trust, the trend could accelerate. America risked losing not only international talent, but also its own young citizens to schools abroad. For the students themselves, the decision was transformative. Genevieve said she wanted to take her international law degree and use it to protect vulnerable communities worldwide. Gisladette, reflecting on her travels across 21 countries, admitted she was not sure where she would end up living, but knew she would never see the world the same way. For them, studying abroad was not just a financial decision. It became part of their identity, a way of proving that they could carve their own path even when the system at home failed them. As the story closes, one truth stands out. For this generation, education is no longer tied to one nation's borders. Rising costs, political turmoil, and shifting opportunities have created a mindset where studying in Tokyo or Utrecht feels just as natural as studying in Boston or Berkeley. What began as an escape from debt and politics has become a redefinition of what higher education means. For students like Genevieve and Gisladette, the journey abroad is not just about where they study. It is about how they see the world, and about a future where the idea of home is broader, more global, and more resilient than ever before. This is the end of that story. Now tell me in the comments, what's your story? I'll read out the most interesting ones in the next video. Do not forget to hit a like button and subscribe. See you.